Hello. Thanks for joining me again today for another study in the book of Proverbs. Do I look any different today? Today's my birthday. I woke up this morning another year older. Boy, time just keeps marching on. I don't know where it goes. It goes by so fast. Anyway, we're going to be in Proverbs, the 18th chapter today. Hope you have your Bibles open and ready to look at this wonderful chapter. Now, this is a chapter that is mostly, would it surprise you, that it's mostly about the tongue. And then sprinkled in these comments about the tongue are some other topics here and there. But mostly, the majority of it has to do with, once again, what we say. So, chapter 18, verse 1. He who separates himself seeks his own desire. He quarrels against all sound wisdom. He who separates himself, he who goes his own way. Don't bother me with the facts. My mind is made up. Here is a guy, he quarrels against all sound wisdom and he just wants to go his own way. If you want to find fault, if you want to be alienated from somebody, if you want to be separated from somebody, it is easy to find an excuse to do that. If you want to find an excuse to be separated from God, it's easy to do. It's easy to find an excuse. And so here is the guy who's gone his own way, who doesn't want to see any other perspective. He quarrels against all sound wisdom. He continues this thought. He continues to expound on this further in verse 2. A fool does not delight in understanding, but only in revealing his own mind. A fool does not delight in understanding. He only wants what he already knows. Again, don't bother me with the facts. My mind is made up. My mind is made up and I don't want to hear anything else. He likes to argue, but he can't tolerate a different view other than his own. You know, this is really happening on our college campuses today, where they call for tolerance, but if you come with a message other than what is politically correct, other than what they already want to believe, they are going to shout you down. They are going to ban you from their campus. Freedom of speech is no longer something that we can grasp, because there's a new generation that only wants to hear what's already on their mind. And he is going to expound even further in verse 3. When a wicked man comes, contempt also comes, and with dishonor comes scorn. When a wicked man comes, you have contempt, you have dishonor, you have scorn. Wicked. This person hates other people's views. He hates the church. He is always upset about something. And he has contempt and he has scorn for anyone who disagrees. Now, it's an amazing thing. Jesus says in John the 7th chapter, verse 7, he says, the world cannot hate you, but it hates me, because I testify of it that its deeds are evil. Jesus said, the world hates me because I testify against it. Jesus set this line. He said, this is what is good and this is what is evil. This is what is wicked. This is what pleases God. And people hate Jesus because of that. You know, it sounds like when we read of Jesus that he must have read the book of Proverbs. He reflects so many things said in Proverbs. Well, not only did he read the book of Proverbs, he wrote the book of Proverbs. Jesus is the living word. Something greater than Solomon is here. Something wiser than Solomon is seen in Jesus. So many of these things we see here in Proverbs is reflected in the life of Jesus. And verse 4, the words of a man's mouth are deep waters. The fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook. Some men, their words are murky. What are you talking about? What are you saying? It's hard to understand what they're talking about. But wisdom, he says, these words are deep and clean and refreshing. Verse 5, to show partiality to the wicked is not good, nor to thrust aside the righteous in judgment. Here again is this theme of injustice, that not for riches, not for friendship, influence, our position should justice be swayed. But he is talking about a perversion of justice where they actually call the good evil and the evil good, where they call the righteous wicked and the wicked righteous. And so you have this totally changed thing. In chapter 17, verse 15, you remember when he said, he who justifies the wicked and he who condemns the righteous, both of them alike are an abomination to the Lord. And we looked at Isaiah, the 5th chapter, where he says, that generation called good evil and evil good. It called darkness light and light darkness. It seems like we have that same situation in our culture today. Verse 6, a fool's lips bring strife, and his mouth calls for blows. Verse 7, a fool's mouth is his ruin, and his lips are the snare of his soul. A fool brings on trouble by what he says. His lips expose his character, and he just says, beat me. Just beat me. I'm a fool. Whip me. That's what it talks about here. A fool's mouth calls for blows. Verse 8, the words of a whisperer are like dainty morsels. They go down into the innermost parts of the body. The words of a whisperer, the gossip, the busybody. Hey, did you hear what I heard? I just heard about him, and this is what I heard about him. And we whisper and talk about somebody else. They're gossips. And they have these dainty morsels. Oh, they are sweet, and they go down easy. And we want to listen to them. We say, you know what? That not only, but I also heard this. And we get involved in this gossip with them. And it says the words of a whisperer are like dainty morsels, and they go down into the innermost parts of the body. Some part of us just likes this type of thing. Verse 9, he who is slack in his work is brother to him who destroys. The lazy and the wasteful belong to the same family. That's what he says here. They're brothers. They belong to the same group. The guy who's lazy and the guy who is just a destroyer. They're brothers. Verse 10, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runs into it and is safe. The name of the Lord, the name of God is God himself. God himself is a strong tower. We can go to God and be safe. And notice what he says in verse 11. A rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high tower in his own imagination. Here's the contrast. There's the one guy who trusts in God, and then the other guy who trusts in money. And there are some who try to trust in both. And Jesus addresses that in Matthew the 6th chapter. He says, man cannot serve two masters. He cannot serve God and money. And so here is the contrast. The man who serves God, who trusts in God, and the rich man who trusts in his money. It's a high tower, but only in his own imagination. It's not reality. Verse 12, before destruction, the heart of man is haughty, but humility goes before honor. The way up is down. The way to greatness is with humility. We can go back to chapter 16, verse 18. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before stumbling. The dangers of pride and the virtue of humility are seen here in this verse. Verse 13, he who gives an answer before he hears, it is folly and shameful to him. The guy who makes up his mind without looking at all the evidence. It is a shame to him, it says. Judgment shouldn't come until you hear the entire case. Verse 14, the spirit of a man can endure his sickness, but as for a broken spirit, who can bear it? People get sick and physically sick, and they can endure it. With the power of their mind and with endurance, they can overcome it. I have a friend right now, he and his wife have the coronavirus. And he says, but we're getting through it. We're almost done, and you can get through it. But it says here that a broken spirit, who can bear it? We can get through physical ailments, but emotional ailments, mental illness, depression, and discouragement, who can endure that? The only answer is only you can get through this with God. When you're exhausted and when you're tired, you should go to God. If the mind is wounded and discouraged, who can help? Only God. And therefore the exhausted and the afflicted are encouraged in the book of James, the 5th chapter, to take it to the elders so they can pray with you. And so he's bringing this out. Verse 15, the mind of the prudent acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. Well, that's easy. The wise person just keeps on learning, and he keeps on listening. He's never quite gotten to the point of accomplishment. He keeps on learning and growing. Verse 16, a man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. Now, there's a couple ways you can look at that. I mean, here you can go back to the idea of a bribe. Solomon is talking about that. A bribe can get you where you want to go. But also there's the idea of the gift of friendship. The gift of friendship can also bring you before important people. And so either way, it can work. A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. Verse 17. The first to plead his case seems right until another comes along and examines him. How many times have you done that? How many times have you seen that? Where you read something and go, well, that makes sense. And then you read something that will say something different. Go, well, wait, maybe that first argument didn't really make that much sense. Maybe there's something that's wrong here. And that's why that it talks about in Scripture that the multiplicity of counselors is what is important. So we can get all the perspectives and all the side before we come to a conclusion. Verse 18, the cast lot puts an end to strife and decides between the mighty ones. Well, in the Old Testament times, they'd often cast lots to decide what was right and what was wrong. In chapter 16, verse 33, it says the lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. You can come to any kind of conclusion, but it better be God's conclusion, whatever that might be. Verse 19, a brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city, and contentions are like the bars of a citadel. Ah, how true that is. It is hard to win a brother that has already been offended. It is easier to take a strong city than to win that brother back. Back in chapter 17, verse 14, it says, the beginning of strife is like letting out water, so abandon the quarrel before it breaks out. Don't offend your brother. Be careful that you don't say something that will hurt your relationship. You know, we have this song that is so relevant here. And this is perhaps why we like this song so much. It speaks to where we're at. Angry words. Angry words. Oh, let them never from the tongue unbridled slip. May the heart's best impulse ever check them ere they soil the lip. May our hearts stop those words before they get out of our mouth. Love is much too pure and holy. Friendship is too sacred far for a moment's reckless folly thus to desolate and mar. Angry words are lightly spoken. Bitterous thoughts are rashly stirred. Brightest links of life are broken by a single angry word. And that's what Solomon is reminding us here. A brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city, and contentions are like the bars of a citadel. Verse 20, with the fruit of a man's mouth his stomach will be satisfied. He will be satisfied with the product of his lips. What we say and how we say it will either advance us in life or destroy us in life. I remember many years ago, there was a young man in a church I was at, and he was having trouble finding a good job to support his family. He's having a hard time keeping a job that he had. And there was a man in our church that worked for a company that had a good job available. And he called me and asked me about this young man in the church. And I said, well, I think he'll do good for you. He comes from a great family. And he said, well, this is important because I'm kind of laying my reputation on the line. And this is a really good, high-paying job that he can step into without any knowledge at all. They will train him in this job and he will be highly paid. And I said, man, this is wonderful. This is just exactly what he needs. And wouldn't you know it, that before this man in our church could offer this young guy this job, this young guy went onto Facebook and put on this profanity-laced statement. And the man called me up and says, you know what, I can't take a chance here with this guy. Isn't that what it says here? With the fruit of a man's mouth, his stomach will be satisfied. He will be satisfied with the products of his lips. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. And those who love it will eat its fruit. Those who hate it, they're going to be having a lot of problems. And so he's just pointing out again the importance of watching out what we say. Verse 22, he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. And all the married men say, amen. I mean, wow, that is right. That is, for whatever the struggle of marriage might be, the challenge of marriage, it is a blessing from God. It's not good for man to be alone, and I'm so thankful that I have a marvelous wife, and it has been such a tremendous blessing in my life. Verse 23, the poor man utters supplications, but the rich man answers roughly. The poor man, he is humble, and he is at the mercy of the rich, and so he is complimentary, he is soft-spoken. But the rich, he doesn't need anybody, and he doesn't care who he offends, and so he can answer any way he wants. Which tells us something about Jesus. Jesus had all the power in the world, and he could have destroyed the world. But he didn't. He came as a poor man with supplications and with gentleness. And why? Because of his humility and because of the great love in which he loved us. Verse 24, a man of too many friends comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. I kind of wonder, how can you have too many friends? The idea here is a man who keeps company with everybody is looking for trouble. I mean, there are different kinds of friends, right? There are the good friends, and then there are fair weather friends. The wrong friends can ruin you. In chapter 17, verse 17, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. Now there's a good friend, and there's a good brother. Here there's a man that can have too many friends, but there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. The King James Version, I like it, what it says. It says, a man who has friends must show himself to be friendly. I think that's true. A guy that has friends has to show himself a friend. My dad had so many friends, and I always wondered, and I asked him, how come you have so many friends? And he said, well, I'm just friendly. And he says, and then he started talking about how to be friendly and how to make friends with people, and how to look out for their best interests. And I was very impressed, and I learned a lot from him in that. our friends usually are a reflection of who we are. There's this story told of the olden days, and there was a family traveling in their covered wagon, and they came to a town, and there was a man working in his field, and they stopped and they said, "Hey, old man, tell us, what kind of people live in this city?" And he said, "I don't know what kind of people lived in the city you came from." And he said, "Oh, they were the worst kind of people. They were terrible. They were gossips. They were mean folks." He says, "We could hardly wait to get out of there." And the man looked at him and he says, "Well, I have bad news for you." He says, "The same kind of people live here." He says, "You might as well just keep on going." And so the man did. Sometime later, another wagon came along. And the man said, "Hey, can you tell me what kind of people live here?" And the man said, "Well, tell me what kind of people live where you came from." And he says, "Oh, they were the most marvelous, wonderful people you could ever imagine. They were so kind and good. If it wasn't for the weather and our child needs to have a different kind of weather, we wouldn't have moved at all." And the man looked at him and says, "Man, you are in good luck. That's the same kind of people we have here." Now, did the farmer lie to either one of these guys? What the farmer knew was what Solomon was saying. The kind of friends we have reflect who we are. Well, the tongue. Oh, be careful, little tongue, what you say. For the Father up above is looking down with love. Oh, be careful, little mouth, what you say. The wisdom and the wicked here are contrasted once again. Are you getting a fuller picture of wisdom? Chapter 18, full chapter, so much to have to say about the tongue. Well, I look forward to joining you next week with chapter 19.